Phil,
Hey,
happy Easter.
Dr. Paul, happy Easter.
How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's been a good week.
That's good to hear. Likewise.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I don't know where Larry is. He's supposed to be with us.
Well, the show must go on, and we'll wait. I'm sure he'll pop in. I almost thought that I would be in his place. So it seemed it was inevitable someone would be. But good evening, everybody. The few people watching live right now.
He's actually coming to us from Germany, I believe. So maybe he has some Farfignugan kind of thing going on with his Wi-Fi. I don't know.
Yeah.
Everybody knows who I am. I'm Dr. Paul. Say hi to everybody. Phil's coming to us. He's representing the Big Apple, coming to us from the borough of Queens.
Queens, right on the Brooklyn-Queens line in New York City.
Awesome. So one thing that's happened, it's con season, right? WonderCon is this weekend. Is that kind of the kickoff of the con season?
Presumably, yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of cool. I've seen some pics coming through on social media. Apparently a lot of cosplay.
That's awesome. I love that.
I do too, actually.
You ever see some of the...
It's best if I recognize the characters, because a lot of the anime and stuff I don't know.
True.
I still enjoy it, but I don't know what it is.
I love the vintage cosplay photos from like the 70s where people really made their own costumes and they looked homemade. But there's like that chic charm to them,
Well, people are still making their own. I don't know. There's a whole subculture here. They're hardcore. They're like 3D printing and all.
Do a lot more today, yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. In fact, that one of the other communities I've been involved in from time to time is the Magic the Gathering community, and cosplay wasn't a thing there until it was, and when it was, it hit that community big time. It was awesome to see. I really enjoyed going to tournaments to play Magic and seeing cosplayers. So
that's awesome.
Let's do some quick shout outs. Got Don C. Hello, Don. Shelby's Comics is here. I do live in Texas. I usually say I'm coming to you from an undisclosed location in the Texas Hill Country. But yeah, I live right outside Austin. Is it Shelby? Is that who we're talking to when you're logging in, or is it someone else under the name Shelby's Comics? Hey, Peter, good to see you. So we were planning a relatively short show this week anyway, and maybe we'll just get started. We are going to do some listener Q&A. Thanks for the confirmation, so I can shout people out correctly. We will, I think, save that to the end, and if folks want to leave questions in the comments, we can add them to our list and probably address them at the end of the show. So, Phil, unless you have any other housekeeping, I think I'll throw up what I prepared for today.
Yeah, not really.
All right. So, I did this segment last week, what are conserved and restored comic books worth? And this is something that fascinates me. I think one of the things we want to know is, congratulations, you just put 20 or 40 hours worth of labor into a book, and it's worth, it has a fair market value of less than when you started. I mean, that's depressing, right? So one of the things we kind of need to know to balance how much effort we put into a book is, what is it likely to be worth? What is the fair market value before we work on it? What is it likely to be after we work on it? So I think this is an important topic, and I think it's something that's really interesting to me. It's kind of the intersection of the my comic book hobby and personal finance as well, which is an area that I really enjoy talking about. So I'm going to continue this series, I think. And there was an exciting auction that ended this week. I don't know if you know about PBA galleries, Phil.
Yes. The
You
DC
know,
Universe collection. I
yeah.
saw a few posts about that.
Ivan Briggs is the curator of the comics consignments there, and he put together a hell of an auction, and there was a lot of buzz around some of these books. So the DC Universe collection is actually a really large collection, and it's being auctioned off in like themed groupings. And so the grouping that Ivan put together for this past week was pre-hero, ash cans, and oddities, and it ended on Thursday. And there was some really cool stuff. So, of course, for those that the uninitiated, pre-hero is adventure before the first Sandman. It's more fun before the first Spectre. It's adventure. I already said that.
Detective in action, you know.
Detective. Well, not action, because action starts right off the gate. But you're right. The other one is detective before 27, right?
Yeah, but they were all anthology titles. That was the one thing they all had in common.
Yep, they were all anthologies. And then ash cans. Ash cans are really interesting. They are books that the publisher slapped together and dashed off to the patent office to get a trademark on the title. So a few of these have survived and are in collectors' hands. They're kind of astonishing to think of. They're basically one of ones or maybe one of twos, something like that. And Ivan has experience with these. He's auctioned them off before and broken records with them. So this was a really interesting auction, and it had some restored books and it had a conserved book that I think would be of interest to this audience. They were a lot of interest to me. So here's the first one I want to talk about. This is Tech 22. It's got sort of something reminiscent of a superhero cover, but it's more of a pulpy kind of hero, and that is the Crimson Avenger. The Crimson Avenger had been in previous issues of Detective, but this is the first cover appearance of the Crimson Avenger. So, I mean, any pre-hero issue of Tech is a rare book and an important book. This one was interesting to me because it was a 7.0 conserved. And I have the grader's notes here, and I'll go through the census and the other stuff later, but since I was going to show the book here, I thought I'd talk about the grader's notes. I think this one was done pretty much perfectly to maximize value. And I'm interested in your input, Phil, but let's go through it. It says conservation includes spine split sealed to cover, cover reinforced, cover cleaned. If you read the rest of the grader's notes, it says cover cleaned, light foxing to cover, medium light writing front cover, spine reinforced, spine split sealed, top and bottom spine conserved, spine stress lines to cover, very light creasing to cover. I think this presents beautifully, and I think whoever did the conservation work on this, chef's kiss. Beautiful. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I think the grade speaks for itself. You know, you always try to assess, you know, the story of the book. So was the spine completely split and sealed and then reinforced, or was it partially split? Whichever case, the work undoubtedly was very good, and structurally the book looks beautiful,
doesn't it? It presents really well.
Yeah, it really does.
So, for those that are interested,
for 1938.
1938, first Crimson Avenger on the cover, 21 Universal, 8 restored, 1 qualified, 3 conserved. The 7.0 that went into this auction is the highest graded conserved. The other 2 are both 5.5s. So we're talking again about a very rare book, and obviously a very early book. And while there isn't as much demand for this as there are for the later issues with Batman, there are some rabid collectors of the pre-hero DC books in particular and tech in particular. So regardless, it doesn't trade hands very often. It's impossible to really say what the fair market value is. There are two sales from 2019 that I think are interesting. They are of the 6.5 and of the 4.5. Now, they both sold for just a little bit under $1,000 a point in 2019. And, I'm misspeaking. I'm sorry. It's actually the 5.0 and the 4.5. The 5.0 is from 2019 and the 4.5 is for 2019. So a 5.0 went for $4,650 in 2019. A 4.5 went for $3,750 in 2019. There's also a more recent sale of a 2.5, and it actually sold for more than $1,000 a point, and that was in the last year. So I would say until you get to the really high grades, it's reasonable to estimate the value at approximately $1,000 a point for this book in 2024. The market we're just probably a little bit higher on these books now than we were in 2019. There was the explosion in the middle, but sort of a contraction. So I think, that's where I placed it at anyway, about $1,000 a point for Universal. And here's the closing bid. Astonishing. Look at this. $6,250 for this conserved comic book.
To be fair, you did say the 2019. Those are the 4, 5, and the 5.
I did, but I also yes. But I explained that there's a sale in 20. So this would actually exceed those. I'm estimating today's value at about $1,000 a point. There has been one sale in the last year, and it got just a little bit over $1,000 a point. It was a low grade book. I don't remember if it was a 2.5 or a 3.5.
For a conservative grade, this is a great price.
Isn't it? And so if you look there, Ivan's estimate was between 2,000 and 3,000. So I think he was putting it somewhere around a third. He was estimating it to sell for about a third of a Universal book, would be my guess. So he was surprised. And I think it's partially because of how well it presented.
Yeah.
Now, here's what's interesting. Awesome. I couldn't find a sale of a restored book, but here's a restored 8.0 that's sitting on eBay right now that anybody could go buy. And it is sitting at just under $3,000. It's offered in Great Britain. It's sitting at just under $3,000 without any takers. So I would say that puts like a ceiling on the value of a restored book, in my mind at least. When we put this, so if we consider this to be sort of the max value of this book because it's sitting there and there are no takers, here's what the graph looks like. So Universal, I would say today is worth about $1,000 a point. The conserved book got just a little bit less than $900 a point. And the restored one is sitting at almost right where we pegged it last time, which is about a third. Now, in this context, doesn't that 8.0 restored look like a steal, kind of?
I'd say so. My only question would be, what's the restoration, the extent? But besides that, on paper, it definitely looks like a bargain price.
I did not pull up the grader's notes on this because I was just sort of using it as a placeholder to be it presents really well, obviously, to get an 8.0. I was just using it as like a kind of, this is the ceiling on what a restored book is here. But so I thought this was fascinating, and it does lean into our theme, which is the older the book is, the more desirable, the fewer copies in the census, the smaller of a gap you're going to see between the value of a Universal and a conserved, or for that matter, a restored book. So That's book number 1. Let's pause for a moment. Shelby says, shameless plug. He has a YouTube channel, not posted in a few months, but does comic cleaning, and he's a friend of Rick's over at Immaculate Comics. Cool.
Hey, Shelby.
And my buddy Mike says, happy Easter. And Peter said exactly what you said, which is, depends on what was done to get to 8-0. Yep. And it does matter, right? If that entire cover's been recreated, then maybe that's why it's sitting there without a buyer.
One thing that can skew the data, as a long-term collector myself, I've noticed, 10 years ago, a lot of restored books really would go for a substantially lower price, overwhelming, because there wasn't as much incentive that people saw in those books. Whereas today, the books go, as we see, for relative bargains to their universal grades. But in some cases, when you're like, this is an outlier, sometimes it is because the book has potential as,
Yeah. Well, that's actually a great, I know you haven't seen my slide deck, but that's a great segue into the next book I want to talk about.
Zing.
So this restored 0.5 was in the PBA auction, and it stunned a lot of people. So
now these are 2 different copies, just to be clear, right?
Yep.
Okay,
just so I'm using this.
For a second, I thought this was a before and after. So I just
no. That's actually why I put them on the left and right the way I did. So this is the restored book, just sold 3 days ago. And the blue book is the universal one, is the last 5.0 to sell. And I'm showing them here to say one thing is, boy, does that restored copy present a lot better. So let's dive into this. So Tech 1 is obviously way more important than Tech 22, right? Tech 1 is arguably one of the most important comic books ever published. It's 1937, as I have here. And this cover's kind of iconic. Obviously, Batman doesn't show up for another year and a half or so, but it's an important book, and it's a very desirable book. This is among the most important Golden Age books ever put out there. Only 17 universal, 19 restored, 1 qualified, to date 0 conserved. Yeah. This is one of those books that's so important. There's actually more restored copies than universal copies in the census. This is not true for very many books, very few books. Because essentially, no matter how bad of a basket case you have, it's worth it to get it sort of presenting as well as it can be and put into a nice auction.
If you'd like just a quick side story,
please. This is why we're here.
One of the 30 or so books that my mentor worked on about 30 years ago was a copy of Detective 1, where, just as you're saying, how there's so many more restored copies in the census here. Now you would say blasphemy, but 30 years ago, the sentiment was different. His client had a almost perfect front cover only, and another copy where the front cover was nice, but not as nice as the perfect one. And he had my mentor, and no, exactly. So an otherwise complete, unrestored, probably like a 3 to a 3.5. And he had him cut the cover about 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch from the spine to the right. So there was just a little of the front cover showing. And he took a scalpel and shaved paper down and made a lap that was so seamless.
A lap joint.
Yeah. He didn't have to do any color touch. The seam was so perfect. But it's remarkable because the work was done so well. But God, he technically destroyed an otherwise
so the other book that he destroyed might be one of these 2 copies. For those that don't know, a 0.5 means, and we'll get into Grader's notes in a minute, it means that it's missing a significant part of the book. So typically it's either a back or a front cover, or it's a whole wrap. I think you can go up to a wrap and a half or 2 wraps if it's interior and still get a 0.5. If you're missing more than that, you get an NG, no grade. Do you know the exact cutoff, Phil? I didn't look it up.
I feel like I've seen books that have like the 3 center wraps missing and they still get 0.5s.
Oh, really? That many?
Incompletes.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't want to mistake. I could be wrong, but
yeah, I think it's half the cover or some number of wraps. You can still get a 0.5. So let's look at this book here. So 0.5, slightly brittle. Grade is a C5. This was graded just earlier this year. Restoration includes color touch, pieces added, tear seals, centerfold, and page 23 missing. Centerfold is a color copy. Married cover, the DC Universe Collection panel, missing from page 1. Wow.
A lot of color touch though. So presumably not the same. It's crazy because the copy he worked on could be ID'd, and there's so few of these. But this is another unique copy.
When I said it could be one of these two, we're about to look at the grader's notes for the other one. But this one was worked over, is my point.
Yeah.
This got a lot of work.
Nice.
It presents beautifully, especially from the front, but it is
it's a Franken book, but it does present it doesn't look like it from the screen. You know, it presents very nice.
Yeah, the other thing is it's missing quite a bit of material, right? Which is I think put a lot of collectors off, but it's still a Tech 1, or it's most of a Tech 1, right?
You don't have a lot of options for a book like this, so it's a placeholder copy at the very least. Yeah.
Here's the other thing that I wanted to show off. This is the back of the book, and you do start to see some semblance of just how much work has been done to this book here when you see the back. Now, for reference, before that, here's what it sold for. So this just closed again 3 days ago. This bad boy sold for $22,500 plus tax. Your tax is going to be about $2,000.
Chump change.
Right?
It's remarkable.
And Ivan had estimated it at $4,000 to $6,000. So again, I think Ivan had estimated this somewhere around a quarter to a third of Universal. And for reference, here's our Universal 0.5. Here is the label, spine, and cover completely split, cover detached. First wrap and page 16 detached. Pages 17, 18, 22, and 21 and 22 missing, incomplete. And obviously the grader's notes don't actually provide much more information than the label text, actually.
Yeah. It's roughly the same amount of pages, with the other one missing 2 pages plus the centerfold. So that's interesting.
This is why it's actually a fairly kind of good comparison. And as I said, this is the last 0.5 to sell.
Wow. Okay.
Sold in 2021. So this is actually the boom was on, right? This was a hot period in comic books. This sold at Heritage, which is a place that is known for getting record sales done. And it sold for $15,600 in 2020.
This would go for more now, for sure. In the last year or so, the early detectives of the pre-Robins have gone really nutty. So I wouldn't be surprised if this would go for at least another 5 to 10 more than what it went for.
Well, I think given that the restored copy brought in over $22,000.
That's crazy. Remarkable.
Now I did put on here, I put the sort of caveat 2021, 2024, take that into account.
Sure.
On the other hand, 2021 was a hot market overall. We've, for the most part, backed off that market, and many prices today for many books are below what they were in 2021. I don't know that that's universally true for Golden Age, but it's certainly true for a lot of books. So I don't think this gap maybe is. I think there has been appreciation in that book, as you said, Phil, but
it explains the prices too.
Yeah,
but they're both healthy prices for.
But even if you were to say that the Universal one has appreciated by $5,000 in the last year, that just puts it at the restored price. It still puts it neck and neck with this restored book, and I think this is still true. The rarer and more desirable the comic is, the closer to universal fair market value for either a conserved or a restored book. But this is also very true.
Which
presentation matters.
I'm curious. What's your opinion about that?
Which book would I rather have? I would rather have the universal book. Wait, can I take the universal and the discount? Then I would definitely rather have it. If we're talking straight up, I think I would still rather have the universal book.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
And I respect too. There's some people that go more for the eye appeal, and that's why those books should not be stigmatized. They really should. They should just be viewed for what it is. And it's just a book that's had more work done than the other copy. The other copy just has a glaringly obvious piece missing from the top, and that bothers some people.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's got charm. I love it.
It does in its own way. I mean, it's got this, I don't know if it's ink bleed or if it's from another book. It's got some writing.
It transferred from the other side of the ad, probably on the interior front cover.
Could be. Yeah. One thing that I think is interesting is look how much more intense. I didn't do any color correction. I assume Heritage didn't either, or that PBA didn't either. You know, I trust those level of auction houses to not juice up their images. I don't know if that trust is misplaced or not, but sure, I mean, I think if you're spending $1 million or more on a book and then you get it and it just doesn't look like their catalog,
even $15,000 or $22,000 is nothing to shit. You know,
but I mean, these are auction houses that routinely sell books that level. So I would think with that sort of clientele that you better color match your screen captures. So with that said, the tech, even though the whites are dingier, look how much more intense the red is. There's something to that. Yeah. So I just thought that was really interesting, and we were intending to do a relatively short show here for Easter, and this was an exciting auction. And I'm going to be definitely checking out some. I didn't bid on any books in this one. I do think there were some records broken, but there were a few books that were well bought for sure. So I think I will definitely be watching PBA auctions in the future. I don't know if you regularly watch them or if you know Ivan personally.
No, I want to say I talked to him once at a convention, but I feel like most of the conventions I've gone to end up being so hectic and a lot of, saying hi to people. So,
I know he's pretty good friends with my friend Bill Field, and I know Bill's actually relayed messages back and forth between he and Ivan and I. So, but I've never talked to him personally myself.
Yeah, I've never been there before. I've as the years have gone on, I've slowly kind of broken out of my shell. I feel it's a natural progression too. I know a lot of people that don't like bid at Heritage or elsewhere because they just don't have an account that they set up. It's just, just a barrier to entry for whatever reason. But then once you do get set up and start bidding, and then Hakes and Comic Link and Comic Connect and PBA, like there's so many different places to go. A lot of people just feel comfortable sticking with what they know. So, but I am aware. So I never bid with them, but I have kept track of, especially this highlighted group of books.
Yeah, like I said, this was a he really curated a nice auction. Speaking of, we had one finish this week. Comic Link finished this week. I think a featured auction, or was it Comic Connect? I think it was Comic Link. One or the other. Maybe it was Comic Connect.
Comic Connect had some stuff finished too.
Yeah, they finished a feature auction this week, and
Heritage is next week.
Heritage is next week. I was about to talk about that, but I didn't see any All-Stars. I actually saw some lots in that Comic Connect, some pre-code horror lots that looked like they had a lot of potential. Raw books, like a lot of 5 that had a pretty low bid when I last looked, but it wasn't something I was going to chase. There are a few books I'm interested in the upcoming Heritage. People who have good eyesight will see I've got some more fun comics up there. And I love the Spectre and Dr. Fate covers for more fun. They have at least one there that I think might be affordable. So I'll be watching a few of the books in the upcoming Heritage. And of course, the big news is the Heritage Action 1 that is being auctioned off has already broken records. Is it the Kansas City pedigree? It's a pedigree book.
I can't remember the pedigree. I just remember it's an 8.5.
Yeah, it was originally slabbed as an 8.0, and it got re-slabbed. And one of the interesting things is it was re-slabbed, regraded, obviously, and they left the same serial number, and the grader notes are exactly the same as when it was an 8.0. Which is kind of interesting. Yeah.
So a reholder then.
But they changed the grade.
But that's not to say work couldn't have been done. So under provenance of, under the provenance of the book, that it presumes it had to have been dry cleaned or pressed or something had to have been done.
Yeah. Yeah. But a reholder doesn't include regrading, is my point.
You know what it is? It's to keep the census cleaner. That way they don't have to remove one and add it. It's the same copy on the census. That's probably what it is.
Yeah, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. Folks know that, but I don't really have a bone to pick about it. I do think it's interesting that it's regraded. There's a grade bump and the grader's notes are exactly the same. To me, I should see something where, like, if there was a crease and it said moderate crease, now it should say mild crease or something like that. But I guess there is a lot of room within the guidelines for a numeric change that isn't necessarily reflected in the grader's notes. But just on such a big book, I'd kind of like to know, I guess is.
Well, I see people on the boards talking about the 2 different printings, well, technically 3 different printings of Superman 1 and how they're, how does a book like that not...
Do you know what? There was actually a development around that. Are you aware?
I know that they were able to discern at least if it was more likely a first printing or a third printing, but not definitively if it was a second printing or not, I think is what it was.
That's not what I'm referring to, but that's true. CGC has been pushed into taking a stance on this book.
I did hear that. And
they are now going to note in the grader's notes whether or not it's a on sale soon or an on sale June 2nd book.
Yeah. Or on sale now or on sale June 2nd.
Right. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. To that point too, I know we'll know the serial number of the very first copy that has that change in the grader's notes because I have a Superman 1 that is currently at CGC right now that presumably will be the first one pegged. So all those people that want to see it in the grader's notes, I know a guy that knows what that's going to be, but hush, hush.
That's so cool.
So,
yeah. So I mean, there's a case.
Which was mine. Very, very cool book.
There's a case where the people spoke and CGC listened and they made, I think, a wonderful compromise and a good solution.
And it makes sense too, full circle. It's for like a book like that. How did that not, how did, between us like a year and a half or maybe 2 years ago, I noticed how like Superman has 4th appearance, but Spider-Man didn't have even the 2nd appearance, I think, noted, or the 2nd or 3rd. So I got them to change it. So if you look at Spider-Man 2s, it says 3rd appearance of Spider-Man, because AF-15, Spidey 1, Spidey 2. You would think the very third appearance, you don't want to go, it's a slippery slope, but at least if Superman gets 5, Spider-Man should get 3. That seems fair. And they agreed.
For sure.
So
that's cool. You know what I'd like to get them to change? This is a personal thing for me. You're aware of the color plate switch color error for Fantastic Four number 110. It's a
the one with
well-known. It looks psychedelic and really cool. Yep. People love that book as in error collectors. That's kind of
like really green and yellow ish.
Yeah,
that one,
green, pink, magenta. It's wild. There is a much rarer, similar error of Avengers number 10, the Immortus cover. Okay. And it's a color plate switch. Way fewer copies out there. And the FF110 gets its own blue label, and it says color variant, color print error variant, something like that. The Avengers 10 historically has been green labeled as an error book. And I have a high grade, maybe the best one out there. Who knows? Because there isn't a separate census for it. So I have a personal, I actually have skin in the game, but a dog in the fight if you want. But I really want to see. Right now the book's raw, and it's going to stay raw unless they can do a variant for that. I'm not interested in a green label for that book.
Seems just you're asking for consistency. There's nothing.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So that's I didn't know we were going to go here with our conversation, but I should have prepared. maybe I'll bring some slides to show that to the people that aren't.
I like that. Yeah, it is. Yeah. It's very trippy. Very trippy.
Mike knows.
Very.
We had
very
I think a couple other comments since we were chatting. Alan C says, "Happy Easter from Canada. Happy Easter, everyone that celebrates."
Yep.
And Shelby says, I just looked it up. For a 0.5, must have front and back cover, but can be split and detached. Just says several pages can be missing. Does that ring true for you? I feel like I've seen a book missing a back cover can still get a 0.5. No?
So it's situational. So it can be a 0.5 and everything's there but the back cover, 0.5.
Right.
It can be the front and back covers.
If the interior is complete,
missing.
Right. Interior complete, back cover missing is a 0.5.
Correct. Yeah. It's like once you get below a 1, once you hit a 0.5, it's inferred like some stuff's going to be missing.
At least half a page is missing somewhere.
Yeah.
Yep.
It could be several. I don't know that mark.
Yeah. In my mind, at least half a page is missing somewhere.
It is interesting. I wonder what it is. That if you go to a store with 80% of the dollar, they take it, but 40% they say, "Ha." So no. But on a serious note, is it okay? It's 60% complete. We'll give you the 0.5, or is it not a game I intend to play? But I'm curious.
Right. Yeah. Peter, I agree with you. A reholder strictly shouldn't change the grade, so that has to be called a regrading in my book. But David says, I am Starman says, I freaking adore Spectre. Me and you both, man. Yeah. He also says, I come to the realization I will never own More Fun 52. Man, never say never. I put, let me see. I'm going to highlight myself for a moment. How can I do this? Boom. Can you see I have a Adventure 70 up here just for you, David. And then a couple issues of More Fun as well. And Mike says, X-Men 99 color plate mix-up interior pages. I didn't know about that one. I thought as a 15, 14-year-old, it looked cool. I bet it did. Well, I don't have anything else that I wanted to chat about. And we did say we'd let everybody get back to their families. I know my family's chilling and looking for my attention right now. So I think we can wrap up here. I'm not sure what happened. It seems inconceivable that the time change is what threw Larry off. Him being a pilot, he would have everything on GMT anyway. So maybe it was connection issues or something else. But I will do our normal plugs. Make sure, speaking of Larry, he dropped a whole bunch of content this last week. Check out Flying L Comics for a bunch of cool stuff. As a matter of fact, one of his videos I want to feature here on our show. I think we should do a deep dive into one of the results he got from CGC that I think is pretty phenomenal. So let that just be a little teaser. And of course, Phil is at phantomrestoration.com. And I always like to plug our comic book conservation community. Go check us out if you're on Facebook and you want more content like this, talking about conservation, especially if you have questions, you want help, you want some camaraderie, very supportive community. So come on over, say hi, join us, and hopefully we will see you all soon. I'll do one last teaser. Phil knows this. I bought a book last weekend. I got it this week, late in the week, and it's a mystery book. It is an early pre-hero book, and we are basically trying to authenticate it, trying to figure out just what it is. And it could be something that somebody just put together, or it could be something really special that they might have to rewrite the history books to account for once we document and authenticate it. So that's been keeping me busy. That's why I only got one video out this week. I did get a video out this week about photo bleaching. For those of you that are interested, I did a very deep dive on photo bleaching. I go back to the Middle Ages, and I also go deep into the chemistry. So maybe if you are an insomniac and you need to hear me drone on about carbonyl groups and carboxyl groups, you should tune into that video and it'll put you right to sleep.
Well, I know I'm going to tune in. I haven't watched it yet, so I'm interested.
All right. Once again, it's been a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you, everyone who joined us for this live show. Really appreciate it. I know, it's Easter and you probably had family members wanting your attention. So thank you for joining us here. Thank you, Phil, for joining us. And
thank you for your time, as always.
Have a great week, everyone. We'll see you next week, and take care of one another. Bye now.